In my last video, I talked about mixed bus processing, and in this one, we're going to talk about the drum bus. And I'm going to talk about 3 tools that I use basically for all drum mixes. And I'm going to look at both an acoustic drums example and one with sampled drums, kind of more electronic, and talk about some of the differences in how I approach them. All right, so this is from my band Eastern Souvenirs, the song 5-Year Plan. And we're going to start just listening to the drums completely mixed. All right, now we're gonna bypass all of the drum bus. Quick note here, so the way that I mix drums, and probably do another video on this, I do 3 different parallel buses. One that's just dry, one that's smashed with compression, typically a hardware compressor, and then one that's super distorted. And then all 3 of those are feeding into kind of a main drum bus. And so that's what we're looking at here. And my goal on this bus is really just to bring everything together to kind of define the final character of the drums, make sure it fits the vibe of the song. So here are the drums again without any bus processing. And the first thing that I pretty much always do on drums, especially acoustic drums, is tape. So I have a tape plugin. The Arturia J37 is what I've been using recently, and I love how it just thickens the mid-range in a really pleasing way. It adds this kind of energy and density to the drums, and also makes them feel more bright and open without feeling harsh. So I'm gonna start with this bypass and bring it in so you can hear. So immediately you can kind of feel this sense of impact in the mid-range that just sounds awesome to me. I love this plugin so much. And another reason to do this on the drum bus versus individual tracks is that you get this effect where the loudest hits are going to kind of crunch together into the tape, and it just makes things feel more connected and cohesive. So the next thing I have in the chain is the Neutron Exciter, and I love this because I can do multi-band saturation. So this is something I'll use when I just want to add an additional layer of brightness or density or cohesion to a drum mix, especially in the mid-range, without distorting the low end too much. And you can also do it in parallel, which you see I've done here at 44% wet. And you can tame the high frequencies so it doesn't get too bright. So it's a really versatile tool that I love to use. So let's hear what it does to the drums. So it kind of brings out the sustain in the drums in this cool way. And it also emphasizes the mid-range more. And I like using saturation instead of just broad EQ because it has a way of kind of bringing up those sustain details in a signal and keeping the part that you're boosting from getting too harsh. Sometimes when you just take an EQ and you crank on the high end or the mid-range, you end up getting a lot of really ugly, kind of pokey transients. And saturation has a way of really softening that. So the next thing in the chain is an EQ. And in this, I'm typically doing a couple main things. I'm usually doing some mid-range expansion. So that's where I have some dynamic EQ here. In the 600 to 700 range, I really like the sort of knockiness of that range. And so I want to bring that out in the transients of the snare and kick. You can hear that here. It almost sounds like someone knocking on wood, and bringing out that character just makes the snare impact feel more solid. I also really like this range around 1500 hertz that has kind of more of a crunch to it, that adds a slightly lo-fi character. So again, this is really just to add an interesting character to the attack of the drum specifically. I have both of these set fast attack, fast release, so they're only expanding when that impact hits. And then I'm rolling off a little bit of the super high frequencies because sometimes with, especially the J37, you end up getting a lot of kind of those super high frequencies emphasized. And so I'm trying to tame that. I want it to feel a little bit less shiny. So I'm gonna bypass this EQ and then bring it in. So yeah, it just softens the high end in a nice way. And next, compression. So I have compression going on the bus where I'm sending bass, drums, and any percussion. Because one thing that I like to do, instead of like compressing just the drum bus, is to compress them as kind of a rhythm section so that they all reinforce each other rhythmically. And I'm sort of getting a little bit of impact out of that compression by using a slow attack and a fast release, keeping the excitement and bringing up some of the sustain of those elements too. And so I use a hardware compressor for this, and I really like how it just makes everything gel together in a nice way. So I'm gonna play without the rhythm bus compression, and then I'm gonna bring it in. So it's not a massive amount of compression, but it's just enough to really get everything kind of moving together in the track in a nice way. And that is it for acoustic drums. Now we're going to jump over to an example with sampled drums, and I'm going to talk about how I use saturation, EQ, and compression a little bit differently in that case. All right, so now let's look at electronic drums. These are some drums that I mixed for an artist who goes by SPLENDID. I'll put a link down in the description for it. But again, I'll play without the plugins on the drum bus, and then we'll walk through step by step. And here is with the plugins. So starting off on this one, I actually have compression first. So on sampled drums, you might not think you need to do compression because the samples are pretty consistent dynamically. Why do I need to compress them? But the reason I compress sampled drums as well is because I want them to interact with each other more like real drums. So in a real drum kit, inevitably you have bleed from different drums and other mics. And so when things get compressed and processed, you kind of hear them interacting. Like the kick is going to pull a little bit on the overheads, and the snare drum and the sound of everything. You know, the snare is going to interact a certain way with like the hi-hat. And so by compressing the drum bus here, I'm basically causing some of that interaction through compression and also enhancing the impact of the drums. So looking at the settings here, I have an attack that's about 10 milliseconds, so somewhat slow, 3-to-1 ratio, and a fast release. So I'm really trying to grab the drums without totally killing the transient and release really fast, so it's bringing up the sustain and kind of creating that pumping energy. So here's how it sounds at 100%, 0%, and then where I landed about 50%. It's subtle, but you can hear how the drums start pulling on each other, and it just creates a different kind of energy that I liked in this case. So that's something I'll do a lot with sampled drums. Just a little bit of compression, usually parallel compression, so it's not overly heavy-handed. And then the next thing is tape. So just like the last one, I like using tape because it does bring a unique energy and thickness to the drums. And similar to compression, it also causes that sense of cohesion to happen, where if you have a really loud snare hit or kick hit, it's going to be distorting everything in the drum kit. And so inherently, the samples sound less like individual drum samples, and they sound more like sort of an interacting drum kit that's kind of moving together. The way that I dial this in is really try to like find out where it starts to break up too much and sound ugly distorted, and just bring it back a little bit from there. So I'm going to bypass this, and then I'll bring it in. You can really hear it in the kick drum. The kick just You can hear those extra harmonics just thickening the sustain of the drum and just giving it a bigger presence in the mix, which is really cool. Next, I have a tube saturator. And so this is Sound Toys Radiator. It also has some built-in EQ, so I'm adding a little bit of bass and treble as well. Yeah, I just really like how it brings this different sense of impact to the drums that I really like. And it also manages the headroom. I feel like tube saturators are really good at kind of soft clipping the signal in a nice way. All right, so next in the chain, I have some EQ, and it's adding a little bit of top end, but it's also taming this part that was getting a little bit harsh and clicky. That wasn't quite enough to do it, so I added Soothe. Finally, I have an extra layer of that multi-band saturation where I'm just adding excitement to the top end, adding glue to all of the drums. So there's like some other drum loops and, tribal beats and different things going on. So this is kind of adding some cohesion to all of that together. So without, like the last example, it's bringing out some sustain too, which is nice, and just, making everything feel a little bit more present and exciting. And so that's electronic drums, pretty similar to acoustic drums in some ways, but a little bit of a different mindset, especially thinking about the role of compression here. In this case, I didn't compress the bass with it because I felt like ultimately I wanted to focus on the cohesion and the relationship of the drums with each other. All right, so that's it. That's how I approach processing on my drum bus. I hope those examples are helpful in just kind of illustrating how I think about saturation and EQ and compression, and that you can take some of these techniques into your own productions, experiment with them, and see how they work for you. I'll see you in the next video.